it's Heather with Mary's Home for Wayward Chickens, and today I'm going to do an informational video that's a little different because it's not about injury or illness, kind of like the rooster one I did. This was inspired by a friend of mine. If you guys remember, I was saying that Mary's Home for Wayward Chickens was like a joke named after a video game that I used to play a few years ago. Well, in the chat room, I made friends with some people that years later I still talk to. And one of the girls had gotten some chickens last fall, and she fell in love with chickens. And she's in North Carolina. She just got 2 silkies a couple of days ago, and she texted me, and she was like, baby chicks are assholes. They're pecking each other, and silkies are rough. I was like, what? Something's wrong, because silkies, especially babies, they're so docile and they're so gentle. They barely even defend themselves. They're more susceptible to getting picked on. So I said, don't put them with the regular flock yet. I know I've mentioned a bunch of times that when you get new chicks, you have to keep them quarantined, but I have never said anything about how to acclimate them. It's a little bit of a process. It's not something that you just do. And what made me think to mention it is because she had said her sister had chickens, and she's like, she said she couldn't put silkies with her flock because they'd kill them. I'm like, well, you don't just drop new chickens in an existing flock and walk away, because especially if they're silkies, there's a good chance they may wind up dead. So once they're quarantined, unless you get like day old up to maybe a week chicks all at the same time that have been near each other and like in the bins at the store or a breeder or whatever, when they're that young, you can pretty much put them together, especially if they came from the same place. But keep an eye on them initially, because if they are like a week old or a little older, they do start pecking each other. And even if they're younger, if there's something wrong with one of them, they may pick up on that and peck. But when they're really young babies, you should be able to just put them together and they grow up together, no problem. Now, when you have an existing flock and you're going to add new chicks to it, you keep the chicks quarantined for 2 weeks. And then when you start, you're not going to introduce them to the flock. I should rewind for a second. When they're that little, they're going in a brooder. And they're going in a brooder, they need a heat lamp. Chicks need a heat lamp. They're supposed to be 95 degrees. Their bodies, 95 degrees for the first almost 4 to 6 weeks. It can go down to 90 at some point in there, and they'll let you know. We give them brooder, the heat pads that they can go underneath. And if they want to get cooler and come out, they will. But for the most part, they stay in there all the time. Chicks want to be warm, and they need to be warm. So you're not going to introduce them to your existing flock in 2 weeks if you have chicks. Now, if you have grown hens that you get, certainly quarantine them for at least 2 weeks. And when it comes to introducing them, you will do the same thing that you'll do with the babies once they are old enough, off chick starter, big enough, and ready to acclimate to the flock. Then your full-size chicks and your full-grown hens can be introduced to the flock slowly. You do not just put them together and walk away. There will be an all-out fight. So what we do is, because we have a chicken run that's fenced in, and then we have a backyard section that's fenced in, a lot of times the birds that are in the run, they fly over the fence. They're pretty much free range. They always were until the fox attacks. We let them out, but we keep an eye on them only if we're home, so they get to wander anywhere. So they come up to the fence where our backyard is, that keeps the dogs in, and that's where our special needs coop is. So they see each other through the fence. Sometimes you'll have a rogue one fly over the fence, and there's like a little squabble. That's not her territory. So she's more likely to get attacked by the hens that are in the yard because she flew in than the other way around. But they can get used to each other that way. So if you have your new hens or chicks in a big dog crate or in a little pen or a run, and you let them introduce them to each other through the fence for a little while, they'll get used to each other that way. And then eventually you're going to step it up, do that for a few days. It could take a week to 2 weeks to safely acclimate new chickens with existing chickens, especially if your existing chickens have a hierarchy that's been in place for a long time. Our hierarchy's in place, but we have an influx of change. We lose some chickens now and then. We get more chickens. So some of our OGs and our older hens that have been here for a while, they're sort of used to the swap out of in and out chickens. But if you have one flock and they're all healthy and they've never known anybody else, they're going to be less inclined to let anyone new in. So they're going to, once you let them see each other through the fence, you can open the gate, you can hold them, carry them in, place them down. I like to place them at a distance. Let them find each other. They'll make a run for it. Don't leave them. If they start to peck, you got to step in. One little peck, it's like, no. But if they get picked on, you give them a 2 to 5 minute introduction. 2 to 5 minutes. If it doesn't go well, take them out. That was an introduction. Try again in a couple of hours. Try again the next day. It's not something that you want to rush into. You cannot force them to get along, and you can't force them to just get used to each other. It is a process. So 2 to 5 minutes. Mac, you'll know as soon as you put one in there if they're going to get along. Now, if you have chickens of the same breed, they'll pair up. Birds of a feather. So packing order isn't the only thing with chickens that's true. All cooped up, packing order, and birds of a feather. So when we get new chicks, if we ever, on the rare occasion we've gotten them from a breeder or a store, we usually try to get 2 or 3 of the same breed. For us, 3, because if we lose one, at least they'll still be a pair. They really do enjoy being with their own breed. They'll make friends elsewhere. They'll get along with other chickens. But you'll notice when it comes time to go to sleep at night, the birds of a feather, they're perched together. They will stick together. They'll make friends, they'll socialize, but then they have their buddy system. Now, granted, if you don't have birds of the same breed, it's okay. They're still going to make friends with each other, but you'll notice if you do ever wind up with another chicken that's of a breed you have, they'll pair up. It's like magic. So we introduce them, and when it comes to babies, when we have chicks and we have older chicks and younger chicks, what we'll do is we'll put them in a neutral area, and we'll separate the new ones from the existing ones. We hid them behind the air conditioning unit once and just sort of let them forage around in the grass for a minute while the older chicks were kind of wandering the grass. And then at some point, they sort of noticed each other because they're chicks. They're choop, 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 choop. And they noticed each other. But because they were on neutral turf and they sort of just wandered into each other, they were more like, sniffing each other a little bit, like, looking around, backing up. There may have been a random little peck here or there, but not much. It was sort of like no man's land. It wasn't this flock's turf. It wasn't the chick's turf. It was a neutral area, and everyone was just sort of wandering. And sometimes they'll get used to each other like that. But when you have a chicken going into someone else's flock, they're starting down here, unless they have balls of steel. And they have, as long as their mouth doesn't write checks that their ass can't cash. If they go in there squawking, they're going to get their ass kicked, unless they're a badass bird, because they'll go from down here to up here in a heartbeat. And if you have an aggressive chicken that's badass and she's not afraid of anybody, and you put her in a flock and they try to come for her, she'll fight her way up, and then that's it. Acclimation can be done, because she's like, nope, I'm here. And then they're all okay with it. It's a matter of what can they get away with. But you don't want to just put them together. So we'll put them together. We've had to do this, we've done it 2, 3, 4 days in a row, 2 to 5 minutes, then like 10 minutes. We stay in there, we separate them. And then like by the 3rd day, sometimes we'll let them out into the field. We'll let the other one out into the field. They've already met each other. They might spend some time, give them snacks. If you I put a lot of scratch and snacks out there for the existing flock and keep them over there. And then I bring the new chickens in and I put some scratch and seed and snacks over here. So they're all each eating their own food, and then sometimes they're like, hey, what do you got over there? And they'll come over. But anything can help. When you introduce really young chicks and you're looking for a mother to mother them, then one hen at a time. Pick your broodiest hen, or pick the hen that you feel is either the most docile, the most emotional, the most loving, nurturing, and give her a test. The chick will probably go right to her. It's up to her whether she's going to accept them or not, because if you can get a hen to raise the chicks for you, it'll make everything so much easier. They'll do all the work for you, and they'll regulate body temperature. You won't have to worry about brooder and all that stuff. But it is challenging to get a hen to immediately accept chicks that have already started to grow without having her hatch them. If she accepts them, they're hers. Then she will defend them to the flock. She'll acclimate them. Wherever she has in the pecking order, they automatically go with her until they're old enough that she's not raising them anymore. And then they go out on their own. And then somebody might be like, oh, mama's not around anymore. And then they'll have a readjustment. But if mom steps in, she's not having it. She'll bring them back up to her pecking order and she'll defend them. If you can't get a hen to do that, then you're going to wind up raising them yourself. And it's just going to take a little longer to get them off of the chick feed and the brooding lights and the heat lamps, and then acclimate them. It's a slow process, but it's necessary. You also want to make sure that your rooster, if you have a rooster, I told you guys, he's the bouncer. There's somebody in the club, you're not on the VIP list, I don't have your name down. Who are you? He's going to come for them immediately. He might like them though. Sometimes that happens. Rooster's like, what are you? That might be a nice new piece of ass. Or maybe it's not. So it's a very slow process. It can take a week. It can take a little longer. You don't just put them in there overnight either. Once that they have a half an hour to an hour where they're getting along outside, and they're like, oh, okay, we give them the whole day. We will give them the whole day to hang out, either in the front, neutral, whoever's turf. If they're getting along, doesn't matter, all day. And then at night, the flock goes to their coop, and the new hens or chicks will go back to where they slept. And then the next morning, we automatically put them all together early in the morning, and then they stay all day. And if everything's good, you'll see, they'll follow them in at night. They'll let you know if they're ready to sleep in the other coop. So those are just some hints and tidbits on how to acclimate your flock. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them. If there are any topics or subjects that you'd like information on, please feel free to put a message up. And if you want to hit like or subscribe, I would love that. Thanks very much. Have a great day.